Hey guys, welcome back, and today we have another week of box office, so let's get into it. Up first, we have & Juliet, which went from 88% last week to 98% this week, and 948K to 1,368,204, a much needed win for & Juliet due to Thanksgiving, and I predict that it's going to see pretty big numbers until the end of the year, and so we won't see the true fate of & Juliet until January of 25. The Louis Armstrong musical continues to be a complete financial mediocrity. Last week 71%, this week 64%, and 672K to 591K. Back to the Future is closing on a high note. 76% last week and 796K to 95% capacity and 1,485,064. Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club, 87% last week, 92% this week, 884K last week, and 1,242,000 for this week. Again, I still think that will close come March, as I don't think that it has proven to be able to continue its financial momentum that you need in order to sustain a production as costly as Cabaret. Death Becomes Her continues to be a huge smash hit. 96% last week and 1,059,374. This week, 95% capacity and 1,249,647. Elf was a complete hit out the gate. Last week, 94% and 1,139,534 to this week's 95% and 1,947,922. GYPSY went from 100% to 93% this week for 7 performances, and 770K last week to this week's 1,622,652. So it seems, despite a more mixed response from audiences, it is doing mega numbers. But again, once Audra leaves, or they decide to just close with Audra, this production will not be, or is meant to be, long for this world. Hadestown, 91% last week, 97% this week, 693K to 1,060,347. So I think Hadestown, again, we'll not see the true fate of Hadestown until January, but so meaning it's gonna do pretty solid in the next month. Hamilton, 96% to 98%, and 1,977,415 last week to this week's 2,579,544. Hell's Kitchen went from 89% to 92%, and 1,316,729 to 1,574,622. Maybe Happy Ending. Very excited about that. It had its best week yet. 78% to 88%. And 591K to 707K. This was a much needed win for Maybe Happy Ending. It's a more moderate budgeted show, but it's still pretty costly. It needs to make around 600 to 700K a week, and it clearly had a very poor start in previews, though they did that intentionally, though it didn't pay off because the capacity did not increase, neither did the average ticket. In fact, it went down. Now, if it can maintain this, then it can 100% make it to the Tonys. I think this can win Best Musical. Even if it does, I don't think it's gonna go on to be a 5-year hit like Dear Evan Hansen, but this can make it to a year, 2 years, something like that. It just needs to get, it needs to sustain this, and I think it will. I think with Christmas on the horizon, honestly, if here's the thing, with how much money it's lost, and with how costly the production is, considering it's a more, well, it's not costly, but it is a mid-sized production that is very costly for a mid-sized production. With how much money it's lost, it kind of needs to make $1 million, and not 1,346,000 like with a zero, but like 1,200,000, 1,100,000 to make a dent that they will be getting enough money to make it past January and February, because no doubt that January and February are going to be tough months for Maybe Happy Ending, but if they can have a good enough December, they can make it through those 2 months and get to the spring season, where they will be getting more momentum from Tony Award nominations and Tony season. So maybe Happy Ending could maybe have a happy ending. See what I did there? Buns. But yeah, man, I love this show. I saw it 2 times. I'm gonna see it again. Go and see it. really go and see it. The buzz seems to be picking up, and I'm glad that this show is doing kind of what most new musicals haven't been able to do post-COVID, and that's make a slow comeback. You know, starting off very weak and then getting progressively better. You know, Suffs and Shucked kind of was sort of like that, but Shucked kind of never got to the heights until the end of its run. Same thing with Suffs, whereas Maybe Happy Ending is starting that momentum much earlier on in its run. And again, I think that Maybe Happy Ending is, I know they changed marketing companies and they're doing a lot, but I don't think this will close this month. That's for sure. Ideally, this show needs to have a 7 and an 8 in front of it at all times. It can have the occasional 6, but that's kind of the high bar that it needs to be set to, and that's a huge reason why a lot of shows close and open very quickly on Broadway, because the bar of making money, which is how you continue to make a show successful, is very high. Gutenberg cost $600K a week. Gutenberg. And that show was much smaller than Maybe Happy Ending. So costs are going up in theater, but also musical theater is just super expensive, and it takes a huge bar to get to. But that's kind of why the system of Broadway of musicals is kind of flawed in the sense that it basically is allowing musicals to fail and needing musicals to fail in order for new musicals to come on. It's the circle of musicals, and that's the business. It's not a good business, but it's a business, you know. So for Maybe Happy Ending, again, this is a much solid improvement. You know, 116K increase. Cannot get to the 5s and 4s for at least this next month, and I don't think it will. So if you're a Maybe Happy Ending fan, you can rest easy, but this show definitely can still close before the Tonys. It's still not out of the danger zone, and it kind of won't be until it kind of wins Best Musical. You know, I could see the show making $1 million in the summer if it wins Best Musical, and then maybe they could get someone to replace Darren and Helen. I don't know, but all I know is that this is a good week. This is good news, but let's not overhype it, and let's not also underhype it. This is good. This is solid, but there's a lot of work to do. Moulin Rouge went from 89% to 94%, and 932K to 1,295,746. 6 went from 83% to 88% for 9 performances. 756K to 1,168,036. Stereophonic had a huge increase from 94% to 98%, and 716K to 926K. Suffs went from 93% to 94%, and 853K to 955K. So going out very good. Sunset Boulevard continues to do good, but it had a big decrease in capacity from 92% to 89%, and 1,870,236 to 1,821,373. Swept Away went from 71% to 60%, and 409K to 412K. These are very poor grosses for Swept Away, and I do expect this show will not make it to the Tonys, but I said that about Maybe Happy Ending, and Swept Away seems to have a more mixed response with audiences, but critics seem to really like it, so I could see it surviving, but it kind of needs to get into the 6s, the 7s, the 8s in December in order to survive January and February, because if they don't, they're not going to survive January and February. I mean, 412K and 60% capacity is just plain bad for any show, no matter how inexpensive. Tammy Faye is worst performing big musicals I've seen in a long time. 40% last week, 38% of seats filled, and 317K to 259K. Bad. The Great Gatsby had a fantastic, amazing week from 84% to 93%, and 1,177,649 to 1,656,686. You bet your dollar butts this show ain't going nowhere. And with Ryan McCartney or McCarthy, however you say his name, it's guaranteed that this Great Gatsby is going to be here for a minute. And I don't think anyone expected that. I think people expected it to do well, but not this well. The Notebook went from 79% to 88%, and 643K to 787K, and that's closing. The Outsiders went from 101% to 102%, and 1,425,531 to 1,840,606. Its best week yet. And then to finish it off, Water for Elephants, 65% last week, 56% this week, 689K to 794K. And then Wicked continues to sell out, grossing 2,930,221, probably due to the success of the movie, which continues to be a smash hit, only dropping 29% in its second weekend. And as of the recording of this video, the Wicked movie stands at globally $366 million. I think its overseas numbers are very super weak, and that's what a lot of movies count on, is those overseas numbers. So like if Endgame didn't come out internationally, it wouldn't have made $2 billion. But I think it's still got a couple territories to make with a sing-along with Christmas. I see this being a Greatest Showman-esque style run where they will eventually get to $1 billion. I still think it's possible. I mean, they went up by 200 mil in its second week. So if you do 200 mil for the next 2 weeks, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, at the lowest this ends with a 7 and an 8 in front of it, which is still fantastic. And 7 and 8 or 9 is where Wicked could land, but I still think it will get to $1 billion. If it doesn't, it will still be successful, but I think as a producer of Wicked, I would be disappointed that a $1 billion 20-plus year run show did not make $1 billion at the box office. And so while it wouldn't technically be a box office disappointment or a loss financially, it kind of has to be talked as a bit of a box office disappointment. Now, technically, if you're looking from a movie musical perspective, this is one of the most successful movie musicals financially and critically of all time. I think that with Oscar nominations, Oscar wins, this movie is going to only grow in box office throughout Christmas, and it has no competition. So it's going to be more of a slow burn with Wicked, but we'll see. So that's the video. Make sure to like, sub, and comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.